Hello everyone, how are you doing? This video today is warning the flying public. The legality of Boeing's relationship with the FTC. Brought to light. Yes, it is brought to light, ladies and gentlemen, and business owners, my fellow citizens, those who fly a lot. And we were representing, Sam didn't know at the time, but I brought several pieces of documentation pertinent to Sam's corroborating what Sam was saying about the Boeing 777, 787. We have documentation that proves with a shadow of a doubt that Boeing gave up supplier auditing to an AS9100 certificate. We have that supplier bulletin from 2002, and they gave it up for 22 years, along with special processes. We have that document too for a professional review institute. PRI was the designated organization that I'm sure Boeing worked with. And just 7 months prior to all of this mess, ladies and gentlemen, business owners, my fellow citizens, 9/11 happened. So the projection of Boeing went from 500 and some odd ships down to 400, and their projection was to lay up between 20 and 30,000 employees. So that gave them a boon of hospitality. They worked on this, I'm sure, for 7 months, and in April of 2002, Boeing came up with the Performance Review Institute to go out and do special process certification like heat treat, welding, etc., and non-destructive testing, etc. So they did that. Just send in your certificate, great quality, and Boeing doesn't have to send anybody there to the facility to check out heat treat and critical processes. The next one is just in a share a couple months after that. In July, they came out with a supplier bulletin, Boeing did, that said, if you are AS9100, the only way you can get in here is if you're ANSI ANAB accredited. Why? Because Boeing sits on the supplier portal. While Boeing supplier portal basically says the third-party registrar must be ANSI ANAB or international equivalent. They also sit on the board of ANSI ANAB that can, the management committee that can grant, suspend, and withdraw certification. Anything yet bothering you, ladies and gentlemen? And then, of course, their supplier bulletin, which requires ANSI ANAB on their AS9100 for aerospace. ANSI ANAB are underwriters for the IAF, which they founded. Their founding members is the International Accreditation Forum in Delaware, incorporated in Delaware. ANSI and ANAB are founding and affiliate members of that organization. They are underwriters, which means they take any systematic or product failure. And their sister organization, ILAC, the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation in Australia. I was also there watching David Calhoun give his deposition to the Department of Homeland Security Subcommittee, and I really felt bad for him. The only thing he really knew was about he was a little bit bashful about telling about his $32 million salary, and he did know how many employees he had, like 150,000. This video, as I said, here it is. Here's at least 4 organizations, plus actually 3 agencies, plus a corporation. We're also going to show you about the FTC. The FTC is very, how should we say, this video, again, is warning the flying public the legalities of Boeing's relationship with FTC brought to light. ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, is a private, not-for-profit, non-governmental corporation. It's been around for a long time. It has federal agencies and corporations on board. ANSI took over complete control over ANAB in 2018, and you have them sitting both together on the IAF board. Between 2015 and 21, the IAF had been taken over by a communist Chinese national, Zhao Junwu, who was also the chief executive of the China National Accreditation Services, who actually certified an ill-prepared laboratory in Wuhan, China, the Bio-Level 4 lab that released the virus. And who confessed to that? Pamela Sale in 2017, the vice president of ANSI ANAB for laboratory accreditation. She said there's very little protocol that labs can choose to or not choose to. So you have you have specialists who went over to Wuhan in 2018, a year after their certification, and the scientists were still complaining about not having properly trained technicians. In a CDC document in 2019, you have the factor that they specify from the CDC, which also sits on ANSI ANAB's board. It states, and I can almost verbatim, okay? It said that well-trained technicians in a biolevel 4 laboratory is the first line of defense for containment. Well-trained technicians in a biolevel 4 laboratory is the first line of containment for contagions that may be released. They're the ones that can stop it if they're well-trained. Well, as you and I know, nobody was well-trained, and that virus was without a doubt released from Wuhan. Pamela Sale confessed to it. ANSI ANAP are underwriters for the China National Accreditation Services, which is a member on the IAF. So when that failure happened in the laboratory, ANSI ANAP are responsible for both systematic and product failure. To attest to my validity here, this actually shows you that ANSI is a founder of the IAF, and ANAP is the affiliate of finding the IAF. And here you go. Now we go on to this. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. I had my dealings with the Federal Trade Commission years ago concerning an impropriety with Boeing. And I must confess that when I talked to Mr. Alan Friedman, he said to us, and I quote, "Well, Daryl, there's 4 people in the office." And I didn't know, I was pretty naive at the time, the FTC being involved with ANSI ANAP. This is why he probably called me, because they don't normally call you from these federal agencies, especially the Federal Trade Commission. He called me, and I said, "Okay, nice." He says, "Daryl, you know, we handle 10,000 complaints a week, and there's 4 people in the room. So that means 2,500 complaints. That sounds like Connecticut with our politicians. There's over 3.6 million people here. And that means for the 7 politicians, that means they have to handle 500,000 constituents. Number 1, they don't have enough people. Number 2, I wish the people who they had were competent, because many times you call their offices, and that's what you get for your tax money." So let's go on with this, the Federal Trade Commission. But I also want to tell you this real quick. In 2009, the FAA made Boeing an FAA authority, a regulator. It states here, the FAA increased the authority of Boeing's commercial airplanes division to self-certify. In 2019, after the disaster with Ethiopian Air and Indonesian Air, the spokesperson from the FAA said, FAA has never allowed companies to police themselves or self-certify aircraft. Something isn't right. Let's continue with this. The relationship between the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, the American National Standards Institute, and the American National Accreditation Board affects several laws and regulations related to standards, accreditation, and conformity assessment. Some of the key laws and regulations impacted include Federal Trade Commission. The law established the FTC and grants it authority to oversee and enforce standards related to activities. Well, let me ask you something, ladies and gentlemen. By them sitting on ANSI ANAP's board, you think they're effective? You gotta be freaking kidding me. The next one is the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act. The law encourages federal agencies to adopt voluntary consensus standards and requires them to consult with ANSI and other standardization organizations. There is none. It's just ANSI ANAP. They will make up all kinds of acronyms for bullshit, but those are the people that they run. And how can they make a decisive decision when you have the FTC sitting on ANSI ANAP's board, the accreditation body of Boeing? Standard Development Organization Act. This law aims to promote voluntary consensus standards and requires SDO. Was it voluntary consensus that Boeing demanded ANSI ANAP all the way through their source, as far as supplier bulletin, supplier portal, and also sitting on the board of ANSI ANAP? Is that voluntary to you business owners? Is that voluntary when they state that it must be ANSI ANAP accredited? That's not voluntary. That's dictatorial. And it's breaking the Sherman-Clayton Act. Also, ISO IAC 1711, that is for accreditation bodies, especially they're breaking impartiality about financial compensation that organizations sit on ANSI ANAP's board. For ISO IAC 1711, if you have that, look up paragraph 4.4. Various industry-specific regulations depending on the industry. Other laws and regulations may be affected, such as those related to product safety, environmental protection, and consumer protection. These laws and regulations aim to ensure that standards and accreditation processes are fair and transparent and protect consumer interests. Do you think that this protects consumer interests by the FTC sitting on ANSI ANAB's board? 203-556-1493.